Okay, good morning, everybody. It's great to see so many of you here today. I can see the numbers piling up, which is so encouraging. I know we had a full house, so there probably will be a few more people pouring in. However, we're keen to get started because we've got a lot to share with you guys today. So I'll just quickly introduce myself. I'm Emma. I'm the Digital Communications Manager at Rewilding Britain. It's so great to have so many of you here today, and what a day that we deserve for rewilding. So it's the first ever Global World Rewilding Day. And we've got a fantastic event planned for you with some brilliant speakers. So yeah, I'll just do a quick bit of housekeeping before we dive in. So just to let you all know, we are recording at today's event, and we will be sharing the recording afterwards. We'll put it out on social media, and anybody that's signed up will also get access to that as well. So if you don't get a chance to jot all your notes down, then don't worry, because you will get a copy of this. During the whole session, your videos and your microphones will be kept off, so you won't be able to see yourselves. That's just because we've got so many of you here today. It just helps keep everything running smoothly by not having lots of disturbances in the background. We have kept the chat on. It's really lovely to see loads of you introducing yourselves and where you're from. If you haven't already, please do go in and do that. It's nice to see where everybody's come from and where you all work and what you're all interested in. And we've also got the Q&A on. So throughout today, if you have any questions or you've already got a question, please do pop it in there. And if there's a certain person at today's event that you would like to answer it, you can direct it to them as well. We've got the voting function. So if there's a question that you think is really exciting, do vote that. That will help get that question asked as well. We will be doing a short break at 11. But please do come back for 11:05 so that you don't miss out on our guest speakers, because they've got some really exciting projects to share with you. And yeah, we'll be live tweeting throughout social media today as well. So if you do love using Twitter and Facebook, the hashtag for today is #ready2rewild. So please do post your comments and screenshots of today's event. It will be really nice to see how everybody's engaging with us, and to know that you're listening and enjoying today. So we are going to kick off with a short film, but I am just going to wait just half another minute because I can see that we've still got a lot more people joining us, and I would hate for them to miss it because it is such a beautiful and inspiring video. So I'll give us all just another 30 seconds, and then we'll be kicking off with the video, and then we'll be going straight from the video straight in. We're going to be telling you about the two charities that are running the event today, which is Heal Rewilding and Rewilding Britain. We'll give you a little bit of an overview about what is rewilding. We'll have a short break, and then afterwards you're going to hear from 3 really exciting projects that are really engaging people with their rewilding. And they're really successful, and I just can't wait to hear what they have to say. So yeah, I'll just give it 15 more seconds, and then I'll be starting off with our video.
Are you ready to be part of something wild? Something incredible. It's called Rewilding, and it's already underway. We are millions of people, a turning tide. From doorstep to delta, summit to sea, across every continent. Now is the time to act, to protect, restore, and rewild the living world. All life depends on our actions. Now. We are all part of nature, within its intricate web of life. If it heals, so do we. People and wildlife can thrive together. Let's change our future and leave this earth better and more beautiful than we found it. Are you ready to rewild our world? Come and join us.
Good morning, everyone. I can't see myself, but I think I'm on, and wasn't that an exciting film? It's really emotional to watch. It's so beautiful. Absolutely thrilled to be co-hosting this event with Rewilding Britain. And hello to all the Heal supporters, because I know lots of you have joined today, so that's really wonderful. And I thought I'd think about why so many of you are here and why thousands, if not millions of people around the world are joining the movement for rewilding. And I think there are 6 reasons. The first is hope. With hope, we act. Hope is the underpinning of so much that we do. And love. If we love something and it's in trouble, you help, you try and do something. And joy. At the moment, the brimstones are imminent. Perhaps some of you have seen one. Think of a hedgehog bimbling, which they do in our garden every night. A fox cub playing. All of those amazing things in nature which give us such joy. That's why we want to see it recover. Discovery. Think about all the things they've found out at Nep, the rewilding estate that many of you will know about in Sussex. It's telling us things that we didn't know because nature has been so confined and shut down by some of the things we've been doing. So discovery is really exciting, a really exciting aspect of rewilding. And talking of that excitement, so those discoveries are really exciting. And what could be more exciting than knowing that we can make a difference? But it's urgent. This is an emergency and we have to take action now. And all of those 6 things are what are behind Heal. That's why we set up, why we launched a year ago, why we have literally worked every day of the week since to build a fund to buy land for rewilding. And that is our mission. We want a rewilding site of 500 acres, 200 hectares in every English county, starting with a county in the south of England. And we are on track to buy by 2022. So that is so exciting. And our 3 pillars: nature recovery through rewilding, climate change action. As many of you know, rewilding is very positive in terms of its impacts on a changing climate. And our well-being. This is not just about wild things, but this is about all of us, keeping this connection with nature, being in quiet, wild places where natural processes have come back. So later on, I'll be telling you about our Heal 3x3 scheme so that you can be literally be part of a rewilding site. But I will now hand over to Rebecca to tell you all about what Rewilding and Rewilding Britain's doing. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Jan. I'm Rebecca Wrigley, Chief Executive of Rewilding Britain, and I'm just going to quickly share screens, just a few slides to as a backdrop to, while I'm talking, something beautiful to look at that isn't my face on a Zoom screen. So I'd like to just set the scene a bit and share some of my passion about rewilding, share a bit of Rewilding Britain's journey. And so I helped set up Rewilding Britain about 5 years ago, probably 5.5 years ago now. And at that point, we were amongst the few organisations around the world really focusing on rewilding, advocating for rewilding and advocating for a rewilding approach. At that point, there's Rewilding Europe, Tompkins Conservation in Argentina and Chile, Conservation Carpathia in Romania, and just a few others. And in the UK, there's pioneering projects like Trees for Life and Borders Forest Trust and Coast, who you'll be hearing from later in Scotland, but also Wild Ennerdale and the Nep Estate. So there were early pioneers in rewilding, but really very few people were using the word or advocating for a rewilding approach. And now it's really exciting to be part of and celebrate today a growing global movement for rewilding. So the new Global Rewilding Alliance has formed with now 120 organisations around the world in over 70 countries and covering around 120 million hectares of land being rewilded. And that's, that's about almost five times the size of the UK. So that's just the start, but there's it's an amazing sense of movement, of change, and of people feeling able to be part of taking action. Hang on a minute. My slides aren't moving forward. Let's just try, there we go. So what is rewilding? Well, for us, it's about the large-scale restoration of naturally functioning ecosystems to the point where nature can take care of itself, but it's also so that nature can take care of us. People are part of nature. We're within its intricate web of life, and as the film says, if nature heals, we heal. And now, more so than ever, in the face of the climate emergency, the ecological emergency, and now the link that we know between the pandemic that we're facing and the loss of nature, now is the time to act and for everyone to play their part. So for us, rewilding really has 5 principles. Yes, it's about working at nature's scale and letting nature lead. So it's about restoring those natural processes like free-flowing rivers and dynamic mixtures of habitats, and a balance between herbivores and predators, and rebuilding that intricate web of life that is so complex and diverse and abundant. And it's not just about the larger species like the wolves and the lynx that rewilding is so often associated with. It's also about the little species. You know, my favourites, for instance, are fireflies that were once here in many numbers. They are also predators, and we should and they're part of that web of life. But also tree frogs, they're predators too. So it's about that complexity and the interconnections and rebuilding that web of life. But for us, really importantly, rewilding isn't just about nature. Rewilding is about the connection between people and nature, because we are part of nature. So it's about people and communities coming together to find ways to live and work within healthy and flourishing ecosystems. And as an example, I was really lucky enough to work in Mexico for 6 years in the 1990s with rural and indigenous communities. And I remember one particularly, a community called Ixtlan and a state called Oaxaca. And that community came together and they started to plan the use of their land and their natural resources. And what they did, they had agriculture and livestock production on part of the land, but they also had sustainable timber harvesting from their native pine forests, and they protected their amazing rainforests and cloud forests. And in doing so, what they did was provided jobs for the community and income for the community. So they set up a sawmill to process their wood. They set up a furniture making business to add value. They employed members of the community and supported members of the community to train and gain the skills that they needed, the young people from the community, to come back and work within the community. So it's a sort of beautiful example of how something can work both ecologically and economically. And we've also found, did a recent sort of study of 23 of the members of our rewilding network, and it showed that the number of jobs in those different projects and businesses increased by 47%, alongside a lot of volunteering opportunities. So we're seeing that rewilding, again, can work for people, can help create resilient nature-based economies and help to diversify jobs. So finally, before I hand over to Sarah to say a little bit more about that rewilding network, I want to start to paint a picture. What does rewilding look like? So this is an artist's impression of an upland scene, maybe in 20 years' time. So we would like to be able to stand at the top of a valley like this and see a diverse and rich mixture of habitats, of peatlands and heathland, and our own amazing native rainforests that many people don't even realise that we have, all intermixed with the abundance of species that comes with that. So you might see the wildcat kitten at the front there, but and maybe even a lynx sitting in a tree surveying the scene. I'd like to see beaver down in the ponds there, free-flowing rivers that braid and meander and are dynamic and ever-changing. I'd like to see, but this is a scene that isn't just about nature. It is there's people in this picture too. So there are farmsteads with nature-based businesses. There are opportunities for forms of production that enhance and enrich nature, forms of livestock that mimic natural processes, and forms of low impact forestry that do so too. But there's also opportunities for nature tourism and ecotourism, and maybe looking beyond this valley further down, there will be towns that may benefit from the flood mitigation that rewilding can support, people who are starting to connect from their gardens to their parks through maybe river corridors out from the towns into the countryside. And at the bottom of the valley, maybe there's a coastal salt marshes that help protect from sea level rise and coastal erosion. And within the sea, I'd love to see large numbers, great shoals of fish returning with the whales and the bluefin tuna and other species coming in behind them, but also providing resources for sustainable harvesting of fish. So it's a rich picture, and we'd like to see businesses taking opportunities to create new nature-based businesses, or in addition to the sort of traditional businesses that we know well. And I'd like to see schools, for instance, in this valley and down towards the towns, having at least a day a month where children have access to nature. So there's huge opportunities for both people and nature in rewilding. And on that note, what we've got prepared for you today is some amazing examples of rewilding projects that are happening. And with that, I will stop sharing and hand over to my colleague, Sarah King, who is leading on the development of the rewilding network that we've set up. Over to you, Sarah.
Thanks, Rebecca. So it's my privilege to provide a bit of an overview on the Rewilding Network today. This is an exciting, fairly new initiative that we've started developing at Rewilding Britain. So the network really is trying to bring together a wealth of knowledge and build a community of rewilders throughout the whole of Britain. And we knew that this was important and needed because we were being approached quite a lot by landowners and land managers who were really desperate to start looking at a different way and a different approach to their land. And so we were looking at trying to bring together these range of different people from different backgrounds and bring together these experiences to share learning and to share that knowledge within the community. And this is what inspired us to start to build the more formal Rewilding Network. And the ambition of the network is really to showcase a whole range of different approaches throughout Britain, but also to allow rewilders to connect with each other and to be able to show what they're doing and to share that knowledge with each other for peer-to-peer learning. We're also looking at trying to use the network to maybe map rewilding across Britain and to track progress, but also show that there is a lot of rewilding that's happening throughout throughout Great Britain, and really start to show that rewilding is happening on the ground now. So we've got on our website, we've got a map that's developing. It's really early days at the moment, but we've already got a lot of projects on the map who have come to us to join the network. And the aim of this map is to showcase a whole range of different projects and examples of different approaches, from wetlands at Wicken Fen to beavers up in Banff, and all the things in between. We've got upland projects on there showcasing the approach that they've been taking. We've got coastal projects that are showing the rewilding that they're doing. And really we're starting to build this really positive messaging, not only about all the really exciting rewilding projects that are already happening, but also showcasing that they can happen in a whole range of different environments. Alongside the projects on the network, we also have a whole range of local groups that are joining our network. And the aim of these local groups is to really start to showcase that rewilding can happen at the local scale, and we can connect landowners and land parcels up with other local initiatives. So we've got a group of about 10 local networks on here, and the aim of those networks is to bring together landowners and land managers for a more connected landscape. but also to encourage other people who maybe don't own land to be able to get involved and to help on the ground and to help inform some of those initiatives. And I get really excited about the range of local groups and networks that we have, because not only does that start to encourage local action, it can also encourage local people to get involved and have that community engagement. And those local networks and groups then feed back to the national network as a whole and provide us with really good knowledge share across all the local areas. And one of the other really exciting things about the network is we can start to showcase a real kaleidoscope of different approaches to rewilding. There really is no one size fits all to rewilding across Britain. And we can start to showcase all these different approaches, from tree planting up in the extremes of the Highlands in Scotland, all the way down to reintroducing cattle and horses and ponies in some of our lowland habitats, through to coastal projects where we've got managed realignments that are restoring salt marshes, and also through to our marine environments as well, where we can start to see some of our seagrasses and kelp forests coming through. And through building this community with all these different approaches, we can then share the knowledge from uplands through to lowlands, all the way down to the marine environments. And we can share those ideas and share those experiences throughout the network. We can also help to build the evidence throughout the network. We launched a story last week about some of the evidence that Alice Driver's been collecting across a handful of some of the network projects that have shown that not only does rewilding provide a benefit to biodiversity, but it also provides a benefit to people. We've seen jobs within a small sample of the rewilding projects increase by 47%. And we've also seen a 9-fold increase in volunteering opportunities. And we know how important these opportunities are for those rural areas, and to bring a diversity of people into those rural areas and to provide those jobs, but also those experiences for people. And we can start to collect this data through the network and use that evidence not only to, again, share that learning, but also be able to inform upcoming policy. So who can join the network? It's a really new network at the moment. So for now, we're just focusing on landowners and land managers to come and join the network to share those practical experiences. We acknowledge that even small-scale rewilding is vitally important. So we've opened up the network for small holdings and small-scale projects, and we will then share practical content and guides and really focus webinars to those members to help to aid their decision-making and provide that guidance that's vitally needed. We also are opening up the network for marine project managers. And again, we're inviting local groups and networks to come and join the community to share their knowledge and to link up with other landowners. So I'll share the website after this in the chat if anyone wants to have a look in more detail about the network. If you've got any questions, then feel free to email us, but we're looking forward to expanding this community over the coming months and really start to build our community of rewilders. So coming up next, just to provide you with a bit of information about our next speakers, we've got 3 fantastic talks coming after the break from some of our, well, they're all network members to provide a range of experiences around what they've been doing. So we've got Sarah Smith, who works at Wicken Fen, who's going to provide us with an overview of her projects, looking at wetland restoration. We've got Dominic Buscall coming to talk about Wild Ken Hill. And then we've got Russell Cheshire, who's coming from the Coast Project to provide a marine example of the work that they've been doing. So I think we're going to take a quick break now for the next 5 or so minutes, and we're going to be coming back at 11:05 so that we can start to hear some more from the exciting network members and some more presentations. So please come back soon. Thank you.
Hello, good morning everybody. Thank you for the lovely welcome this morning. I am Sarah Smith and I am General Manager for the National Trust covering the Fenland area in Cambridgeshire, which covers and includes Wicken Fen. Today I'm going to be talking mostly about how we engage people in our work, because both people and nature are at the heart of all we do at Wicken Fen. But firstly, for those of you that are perhaps not familiar, hold on, I can't move my slides. There we go. There we go. So firstly, for those of you who are perhaps not familiar with the Fen, I'll introduce you to what we have at Wicken Fen. It's the National Trust's oldest nature reserve, and the first 2 acres were purchased in 1899. And today, over 120 years later, we have over 2,000 acres for people to explore and for nature to thrive. The core area of Wicken Fen is one of the last remaining fragments of undrained fen in East Anglia, and it's a highly designated site, an incredibly diverse nature reserve, which has been well recorded both during and previous to the Trust's 120-year tenure.
Sarah, sorry to disturb you. Your
Yes.
slides are fantastic. Your audio is just a little bit blurred. Do you mind just switching your video off just to see if that helps? Thank you.
There we go. So in the 1990s, the Trust realised the fen was too isolated. Its species were in decline, lacked resilience to climate change, and was under increasing pressure from visitor growth because it was located amidst a growing Cambridgeshire population, and it's also surrounded by an intensive farming arable landscape. So we set about a plan to secure the future of the fen called the Wicken Fen Vision. Now, the Wicken Fen Vision is a 100-year plan to extend the nature reserve to cover 53 square kilometres, restoring primarily agricultural land that rests on the peat. From the start, we've adopted a hands-off approach to restoring natural systems and processes, an approach that's come to be recognised as rewilding. Nature is most definitely back in charge at Wicken Fen. In the last 20 years, we've doubled the size of the nature reserve. We've got areas that we former arable fields that are now regularly used by over 5,000 wintering wildfowl on open water, reed bed and wet grassland. Iconic species have returned, including cranes, otters, short-eared owls, water voles, and many invertebrate species. Our vision was always about more than just nature, and today we have 4 guiding objectives around habitats and wildlife, people, learning, and supporting a sustainable economy. The 2 areas I'll be focusing on for the remainder of the presentation are the people and sustainable economy. We aspire to provide a beautiful natural environment for the enjoyment, learning and recreation of everyone. Starting with the basics is our provision of access. Each year, Wicken Fen welcomes over 70,000 visitors, but these are just the people we can count through our visitor centre. Many more use the public rights of way across the nature reserve, so the actual figure we believe to be more than double this. Since starting the vision, we've also created or improved over 48 kilometres of access. So this is footpaths, cycleways, bridleways. 8 bird hides have been built or refurbished. And we also have toilets and car parks to address the basic needs of our visitors. Boardwalks are in place in the core areas. These have a dual function, providing an excellent level of accessibility and protecting the delicate, undrained peat soils and fenland habitats beneath. We also have a strong communications presence through our website and social media activity, which helps people access us virtually and engages with our visitors and local communities, even when they are not on site. People and nature and the connections between the two are at the heart of everything we do. Research has identified that a connection with nature brings about more positive environmental attitudes and behaviour. Connecting with nature has a far greater impact on environmental attitudes and behaviours than knowledge alone. In this regard, the ability to notice nature has greater impact than knowing everything about it. It's also crucial to improving people's engagement with our rewilding approach. We strive to enhance these connections with nature and allow people to explore independently or with support by providing a wide range of experiences for our different audiences. So we have cycle hire, boat trips, we have a back to basics campsite, we lead many events and learning activities. We have our Fen Cottage, which explores the social history of the Fen. We work regularly with local communities, including with a community liaison forum that meets with us regularly. And we have many projects, such as art projects, such as Mother, which you can see depicted there in the bottom right image, which is an art installation in partnership with Wising Arts, currently installed on the Fen. Coming up this year, we have a community engagement project supported by the National Lottery Heritage Fund, as well as a roaming outdoor theatre, which is going to be telling our stories using the nature reserve as a backdrop. The nature reserve, rewilding, and our visitors also bring the opportunity to generate income, which is reinvested back into our conservation work. Our rewilding approach to management helps us be financially sustainable as well as environmentally sustainable. Admissions, car parking, our shop and frothy coffees in our cafe bring us commercial income, and charges apply for some of the experiences I've mentioned, such as cycle hire, our campsite, boat trips and events. As a charity, we also generate funds through a broad spectrum of fundraising activities. Our work also enables us to support the local economy. We currently employ 24 staff across many different functions. As well as our rangers, we've got staff working in retail, a cafe, welcoming visitors and cycle hire. We're also supported by around 100 volunteers. We have our free roaming herds of conic ponies and Highland cattle, but also provide grazing opportunities to local farmers. Our visitors are largely local, but we do receive a significant number from further across the UK who contribute to the wider tourism economy, supporting hotels, pubs, bed and breakfasts, campsites, and many more in the local area. We also recognise that Wicken Fen and our vision alone is not enough to meet the needs of either nature or people in Cambridgeshire. I spend a good amount of my time working beyond our boundaries with partnerships and landowners. Of particular note is our local nature partnership, Natural Cambridgeshire. Together we have a vision to double space for nature in Cambridgeshire by 2050. As part of this vision, we aspire to connect the core areas of nature across the Fens. We're working in partnership towards a UNESCO Biosphere Reserve designation to recognise the Cambridgeshire Fens as a place that delivers nature conservation, sustainable development and tourism with engaged communities. I am a Fen girl at heart. I was born less than 10 miles from Wicken Fen and raised as a farmer's daughter. The peaty soils of this area tell my story. For this reason, I find it particularly exciting and rewarding to be part of Wicken Fen's future and the wider partnerships that have the potential to change the Cambridgeshire Fens on a landscape scale for the benefit of both people and nature. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. That was awesome. I'm going to pick up, hopefully, right where you left off. So here, there's my screen. Great. I hope everyone could see that. My name's Dom, and I am the project manager at a site called Wild Ken Hill, which is, as pointed out on the map, on the kind of west coast of Norfolk. So on the funny bit of Norfolk that looks back towards the rest of the UK. And over the Wash and Lincolnshire, quite a lovely part of the world with lots of kind of existing kind of natural and semi-natural habitat around the Wash, of course, just by us, but also North Norfolk coast too. But I think we're also in quite a kind of intensively farmed area as well. That's kind of what mostly goes on inland of where we are, and it's in that context that we kind of found ourselves a few years ago when I started to get more involved in the project, kind of really thinking about what the future looked like for kind of farms like us. And I think we had two real problems that we wanted to deal with. One was, biodiversity on our own farm. We'd managed pretty well. For a long time, we'd always been doing things in a pretty nature-friendly way. But when we look further afield, we saw that biodiversity in the UK and globally was performing incredibly poorly. By some metrics, we've lost around 60% of abundance in the UK in the last 50 or 60 years. The same story really is true of climate, and indeed the amount of green space we have access to. And I sort of thought that we should be doing a lot more on the kind of environmental front. And so we decided to try and be, not just look after what we have on our own site, but to try and become a national exemplar for sort of responsible land management. The other problem we had, and this is a problem that many farms have in the UK at the moment, is that with Brexit, there's quite a significant change in agricultural and environmental policy. And that more or less means that farmers are going to have quite a lot less money coming to them as subsidies. Used to get quite a lot from the EU, and that's no longer going to happen. And so we also had this big commercial challenge. And it was really interesting to hear Sarah talk about how, they're really the fantastic work they do with nature at Wicken Fen has enabled them to be commercially viable. And we thought, we could do the same. So we could take some of our farm and rewild, quite a bit of it, and do something exceptional and radical with nature. And that might actually be not only a great thing for the environment, but also a great way of kind of solving some of our commercial problems. And what we embarked on was kind of what we call our three-prong approach. And the prongs really at Ken Hill, they're different land management tools, is what I would call them. So bang in the middle there, we've got our kind of rewilding area. That's 1,000 acres. And that's kind of at the heart of what we do. That's taken some marginal farmland, so some soils that were not particularly good for growing food. And we've instead said, let's grow biodiversity there instead. Let's store carbon in the soil and in biomass, and let's provide like a new area of green space for our local communities. But also, I think one of the interesting things about Ken Hill is it's not just rewilding, and what we're doing is kind of trying to show how rewilding could fit in to the kind of English lowland landscape. And importantly, we still have a large area inland where the soil is a bit better for growing food, where we're performing something called regenerative agriculture. And that's really a style of farming which is focused not just on producing a yield and growing food, but also on improving soil health. And so that in a way is also, it's a kind of a natural bedfellow of rewilding, because it's working with nature. It's also improving biodiversity. You get lots of food as a great byproduct, and you're storing carbon in the soil at the same time. So we think that's a kind of fantastic and natural pairing. We also have kind of a bit more of a traditional nature reserve down by the coast. And I won't go quite into the nuance of why we do that a bit differently. But there are many reserves around the UK like that, often managed by organisations like the National Trust or the Wildlife Trusts, where we need to use rewilding to connect those areas up. And that's really what we're hoping to show with this project, is how you could start to think about connectivity at a landscape scale. I think throughout everything we do, people are really at the heart of it. There is this sort of, I guess it's a misconception that rewilding would see people, removed or taken out of landscape somehow. And I thought it was amazing to see all of Sarah's slides, because, it just shows how totally nonsense that is. People are right at the heart of rewilding. And that's been totally consistent with what I've seen at Ken Hill, in the project here. So I think the first thing is that we were a traditional farm team. We had about 5 or 6 employees, and that team really for decades had been shrinking and shrinking as the machinery and the technology we had in our farm got better and better. People would retire, and we'd actually realized we wouldn't need to replace them, and we had this ever shrinking kind of workforce. And actually 2 years into our own rewilding journey, we're just getting started. We've already employed 1 new full-time employer. Isn't that just amazing to think? It's so hugely significant that we've added one in that time, and we've got at least 4 kind of pretty full-on volunteers now working with us, and a lot of plans in the future for expanding both, again, you know, our team working for us and also volunteers. So it's sort of fantastic to think that Rewilding has really actually, you know, invigorated our business and brought more people into the fold, more people interested in working with us and helping us. But also externally, we've done a lot of additional engagement too. So, you know, I don't think anything quite as serious as Wicken Fen just yet, but really on an exciting journey of our own. So in particular, we've done a lot of free school visits over the last 2 years. We've got our first sort of set of arts performances taking place in the backdrop of a rewilding area this year. We have adventure play parties for children, and I think, you know, really importantly, and that's what some of the pictures are showing here, we're doing a really exciting program of kind of adult in nature kind of education experiences, and a lot of those are focused around rewilding and having an experience in nature, but also a lot about sustainable farming too. And then you can see my colleague Nick there, who's the kind of farm director at Ken Hill, smelling some soil and telling some people a bit about soil health and when soil smells good and when it doesn't. Another kind of thing that we're working on at the moment is to bring back white-tailed eagles to Eastern England. It's a native bird of prey. It was unfortunately persecuted to extinction by us humans a few hundred years ago. And we recently brought forward proposals to bring that bird back. We submitted an application to the government and their wildlife licensing agency, Natural England, to sort of let us get on with that. And really, we're waiting for the decision, but really what's motivated us to do that is bringing back these sort of iconic species. And the white-tailed eagle is iconic. I was lucky enough to see one myself for the first time last summer. It has an 8-foot wingspan, and it is a majestic thing to see, particularly in a kind of a big Norfolk sky like the ones we're blessed with here. It's just totally inspiring. And I think, again, bringing forward what Sarah said, you know, it's actually those, for me, it's those connections you make with nature, you know, driving down, you know, the A149 and seeing a white-tailed eagle overhead. I think that's what really drives people's enthusiasm for nature and nature conservation. And I think the power of hopefully bringing this bird back will be, yes, it's great to have the bird back and it's important conservation work, but I hope that it really provokes a lot of important discussions and gets a lot of people engaged in nature who otherwise might not have been. And that's why I think, you know, that's a really important part of what we're doing in terms of our own engagement with people at Wild Ken Hill. We're across social media, usually at Wild Ken Hill. We've got a website, wildkenhill.co.uk, a newsletter, so do come and engage with us and kind of learn more about our story. It's the best way we can have an impact, which is really our mission. So thank you very much for your time, everyone. It's been a delight to talk to you. It's a fantastic movement that's kind of bubbling up now, and how exciting to congregate on World Rewilding Day for the first time. And with that, I'll hand over to the next speaker. So thank you.
Thanks, Dom. That was great. It's nice to hear about the white-tailed eagle. At the moment, I'm on the Isle of Seal, just across from Mull, and we've had white-tailed eagle up here for a long time. There's now over 100 breeding pairs in Scotland, so it'll be great to see them elsewhere in Britain as well. Right, I'm just going to try and share my screen. Do that. There we go. So this is where I am, at the top of the screen there, and I'm actually chair of the Community of Arran Seabed Trust, Arran is the largest island in the Firth of Clyde, which is southwest of Glasgow. The Firth of Clyde is Britain's inshore's largest inland sea. It used to have a very productive fishery, but over the years that's not just declined, it's been devastated, mostly through overfishing. Used to be good for cod, haddock, all sorts of things like that, and now we're reliant on crustaceans. So we really have moved down to the bottom of the food chain. In the early 90s, these two chaps, Howard Wood and Don McNeish, who were local scuba divers, decided that they'd seen too much of this devastation going on, needed to do something about it. Don, the taller chap, has family and friends out in New Zealand, and on a visit out there, he was introduced to a chap called Bill Ballantyne, who was instrumental in starting up marine reserves in New Zealand. Some of you may have heard of those. They've been very successful and continue to this day. But they realized quite quickly that they themselves couldn't turn round the devastation that had been caused. There's a few charts here that show the extent of the problem. The top graph there, the multicolored pieces are all whitefish catches that declined dramatically, and the little black line is the increase in nephrops, langoustine, Norway lobster, prawns that took place as the fish left. The number of prawns increased and the fishermen all turned to those. So they started bringing the local community in and asking them what they thought about it, and using the community to contact MPs, MSPs. There's another shot of what the seabed looks like after it's been dredged. And they had meetings in the homes, and there was tea and biscuits and that sort of thing. This is still in the early 90s, or late 90s, early 2000s. And they carried on and carried on. And although they were very successful in contacting the members of Parliament, or members of the Scottish Parliament as well, the reaction was, well, yes, the fishermen tell us everything's healthy, they're making lots of money, and we don't see any need to change. Well, what they had to do was provide evidence that things weren't as good as people were saying, and that historically things had been actually much, much better, and people were making much larger livings from the sea. And they did this by using science. They involved universities such as the University of Glasgow, University of York, and recently many more universities from around Britain, to look at the waters around Arran and see what had gone wrong and what could possibly be done in the future to bring back a healthy and diverse marine ecosystem. What they proposed originally was that on the east of the Arran, in Lumlash Bay, a community marine protected area and a little no-take zone. This was put forward to government. It was talked about at great length. People generally on the island were very, very supportive of it. And initially, the fishing community from around the wider Firth of Clyde were also supportive of it. And then the fishing community realised that this was a really productive area for prawns and lobster and crab, and they didn't want to lose Lumlash Bay to fishing. So what happened was that we ended up just with a small area of the no-take zone at the north end of the island. The rest of it was still open to trawling and dredging, and also the area to the east outside of the islands was allowed to be fished as well. The no-take zone was officially enforced in September 2008, and it does exactly what it says on the tin. It's a no-take zone. Nobody is allowed to do any fishing at all in that area. On that little chart, it looks quite big, but it's actually just 1 square mile. What we had to do then was quantify the improvements, and we did that again by surveys using the universities, and they proved that as the no-take zone was recovering itself, because we don't very often go out and plant fish and lobsters and things in the sea these days, the plant life was recovering, and then the animal creatures started to come back in, and they actually spread out from that area. Now, with the ability to fish continuing outside the no-take zone, that meant that whatever grew in there and then went out ended up as either catch or bycatch. So there's the no-take zone. There's Scotland's current MPA network. There's lots of them, nearly 40 marine protected areas at the moment. In 95% of them, trawling and dredging is largely still permitted. So the seabed itself is not actually protected. We'll refer to this as a sort of paper park system, where yes, it looks good on the government's record to have huge areas of water designated as protected areas, but in actual fact very little is achieved. We kept on, and in 2016 the South Arran Marine Protected Area was implemented. This now extends all the way around the southern half of the island, and whereas we had 2.5 square kilometres protected at the north end of Lamlash Bay, which is the little hatched area you might be able to see there, we now have in excess of 200 square kilometres, which is not totally closed off to fishing. The outer edges, they're still allowed to trawl, and in the centre section, the square box-like part, all scallop dredging has been prohibited, but you're still allowed to use pots, creels to catch crabs and lobster, which is fair enough. They're a more sustainable, low-impact method of fishing. There are 1 or 2 areas, well, 4 areas you can see there, which are fully protected, and you can't use creels there because the seabed itself is host to some very delicate species like marl, which is a coralline seaweed, or in Whiting Bay on the east coast there, the long banana-shaped piece is a seagrass meadow, which we're hoping will recover itself. Is it working? Well, there's a student with the largest lobster ever caught in the no-take zone. The number of scallops in the no-take zone has increased 4-fold. The pinky substance is the marl in the bottom right-hand corner there. That is starting to spread out. And although it's doing that, we expect that to take quite a while, because marl itself grows at the rate of approximately 1 millimetre per year. So it's going to take quite a while to cover the whole of the sea. Here's a graphic example of the difference protecting the seabed can make. On the left, we have a newly dredged area, which looks like a harrowed field. On the right is exactly the same area 4 years later, much healthier, and there's been no human intervention other than excluding highly impactful activities. Nature has done all this itself. Are the community still supportive of us? Yes, they are. These photographs are images from a recent protest we organised at short notice. A salmon company wants to install a new farm site off the northeast coast of Arran. People are not very impressed with this idea, so we said, well, why don't we demonstrate the strength of public feeling? The little photograph at the top has 4 or 5 dozen people in it. The salmon farmer said, well, if that's the best you can manage out of a population of 4,500, that's not very good. Now, bear in mind, this was a short notice protest. The picture at the bottom shows all the people walking back on the shore after the protest, and there's over 200 who turned out on one day. So we can work to improve the seas. The benefits aren't as immediately as apparent as you would have on land, because of course most people don't go under the water, but the benefits are much more than economical. The seabed is a huge carbon sink, so we're helping to mitigate the effects of anthropogenic climate change. Healthy waters make it much more healthy for the people who live around the sea. And it also allows the fishing industry to, if they change their methods with help from government, continue with sustainable fishing, and perhaps produce something that is more in keeping with what folk in Britain want to eat, such as cod, haddock, and the larger white fish. So there's some little bits and pieces if you want to see what we're up to. The top address is a link that's direct to a report from the University of York that tells us exactly what we've achieved over the last 2 decades, and the rest are just how to keep in touch with us the rest of the time. So thank you very much for listening, and thank you for Rewilding Britain and Heal for the chance to speak to you all. Cheerio.
Thank you so much, Russ, and to Sarah and Dom for those 3 incredibly inspiring examples, which really bring to life the theme of this event, which is about how people are engaged with this process. And my job now for a few minutes is just to reflect upon those 3 presentations and what I got from them. And while I'm doing that, we'll be doing questions next. So if you have any questions or want to upvote questions, then look at the Q&A in the bottom, and we'll get to that in a minute. So let's start with Sarah Smith from Wicken Fen. And when you think that the National Trust was only founded in, I think, 1895, so it was 4 years later that the Wicken Fen work began. And as Sarah said, it's effectively been rewilding for, you know, an awfully long time. And the fact that it was hanging on to this last fragment of undrained fen was vital. And what really stood out from, there were a lot of things that stood out from Sarah's talk, but the one that really struck me was this recording of species, how dramatic that figure is of 9,600 species. So that was one of the things that really came through. So extraordinary to be essentially one of the earliest rewilders, Sarah, and all your colleagues. And the fact that you have cranes back and otters and water voles, such wonderful species to be able to talk about. And those are part of the inspiration of this whole place. And the great thing to see is how you've expanded. And the story of expansion is something that certainly 2 of our speakers have talked about, which is Wicken Fen getting bigger, and Russ talking about expanding the marine work that they've been doing. So 70,000 visitors, and you think you've got double that is just remarkable, and further evidence of just how much people want to connect with nature, and how much as part of nature we need that. So, and then noticing, that was the other thing that you talked about, Sarah, was how important noticing is. And that is the way that we get the benefits, the dopamine, the oxytocin, the serotonin, the 3 chemicals in our brains that help our well-being come from that noticing nature. And personally, the frothy coffee sounded really good. And I saw a few comments pop up of people saying we must come. So I can imagine we're like coiled springs, and when we're allowed to travel, you're going to have maybe a lot more than the visitors that you might have had in the past. And the future work sounds really exciting. So as a lifetime member of the National Trust, and someone who obviously loves rewilding, from me personally, I'm sure from all the people in the audience, your work, Sarah, is absolutely wonderful. And then we came to Dom, and we talk to Dom quite often, and Hannah, my colleague, has been up to see Wild Ken Hill, and I'm hoping to go. And I think what's so striking about Dom and his colleagues at Wild Ken Hill is the foresight they had to see the future for farming, and to think, how can we secure this business? How can we go about this and move from this traditional base into something else? And the word shrinking was used, and I'm sure there are a lot of people who manage land who see this future. And it was also great to hear that it wasn't, being friendly to nature wasn't a new thing for Wild Ken Hill, but this was a major shift to move to these 3 areas: the farming area inland, the rewilding area next to it, and then the conservation areas. And to have these 3 side by side is, at that scale, is really unusual. And the national exemplar, I mean, for me, it is the national exemplar of those 3 things done really well side by side. And Dom used the word responsible land management, and in the context of the climate and biodiversity emergencies, you know, I think responsible land management is what we need, and we need food production, and we need it done in a way that's going to support the recovery of nature. So the action on the climate, the fact that this is also supporting climate change was excellent. And the white-tailed eagles project, I live in the Thames Valley, where the return of the red kite has been one of the extraordinary events of my last, I think, probably 20 years. But to imagine seeing an 8-foot eagle, and Dom has an amazing picture of an eagle and a red kite in the same shot, and the difference in size is absolutely extraordinary. And he said majestic birds in the skies. So I think the inspiration, the way that people are taking interest in nature because of seeing something like that is really, really important. So again, from everybody in this community, Dom, the work that you do is absolutely wonderful. And you have a private farm, so you're not a visitor destination as such, but I know you do all you can within the limits of that to talk to people, to have visitors, to try to show, and also show through social media and your website what you're achieving at Wild Ken Hill. So totally inspiring work. And Russ, what really stood out for me from your talk was how vital data was. So you began with those extraordinary graphs, and I had no idea that the loss of the swimming fish meant that these langoustine and other species, I can't remember the word you used, but that was a new one to me, was a consequence of decline, effectively. And the fact that 2 people really began this, I think that's what's so important. You may think as a single individual you can't affect change, but if you and somebody else can then connect with more people, and then there was a connection to Bill about marine protected reserves. So that was really key for me. Obviously the involvement of the local community, the support of the local community, and the fact that government said it's fine, people are earning enough, and it isn't just about economics. It can't anymore just be about economics. So it was about data and the proof and using the science, and that was wonderful. What else came through, Russ, from your presentation was how long this takes. It isn't a rush. We have to give nature time to recover. And the enforcement on that 1 square mile, and then showing what the progress was, the 3rd way you use data, how is it progressing? Bit surprising to me that in the marine protected area you can still trawl and you can use other techniques, but we have to support our fishing communities. But the fact that you've expanded to this 200 square kilometres that's not totally closed off is wonderful, and the increases that you've managed to log. And when you showed those 2 wonderful images of a recently dredged piece of seabed and that restored piece of seabed, I don't know about anybody else in the audience, but NEP have a picture of an arable field and a rewilded field 5 years later, and the similarity between the 2 really struck me about what happens when you let nature come back. And the fact that the community came out with short notice for that protest against the salmon fishing initiative that they're trying to start was really it must have given you such heart to see all those people support you. So to all 3 of you, it's wonderful. So thank you from everyone in the audience for the work you put into those presentations and showing us just what can be done. Okay, so now we're going to move to questions. So can I ask everyone to put their videos and their sound back on? And what's happening is Hannah, my colleague, has been in the background looking at your questions, looking at the upvoting. and she's sending me messages on WhatsApp. And so the question that's got a very high vote is, what can we learn from Indigenous communities in terms of coexisting with nature? How could Indigenous living skills hold the key to humans rewilding themselves? From an anonymous attendee. So who would like to comment on Indigenous communities? Rebecca, hand up, thank you.
Thank you. I suppose as someone who's been lucky enough to live on 4 different continents, sorry, and work very closely, including living in an Indigenous community, I think there's a lot to learn, and the example that I gave of the community in Mexico is itself an Indigenous community. And I think the things that struck me, one, I don't want to over romanticize it, but is the way that often Indigenous communities come together to decide how they're going to use, what are they asking of the land, and how can they use their land and resources most effectively. So the example in Mexico was using participatory approaches, engaging people, and trying to find that balance between what works ecologically and what works economically. The other thing that really struck me was the intense connection that many communities have with nature. I was lucky enough again to go out with some members of the community across a large area of their land, including some of their forests, and the incredible amount of knowledge of all the different species, what their names are, what fruit they produce, what products you can get, whether you can use wood, which wood should you use for which purpose, was absolutely incredible. So it's that sort of interconnectedness, I think, that really struck me, that we can really learn, and how to rebuild that connection, because I think I see rewilding fundamentally about connectivity ecologically, the connectivity between people and nature, the interconnectedness, the connectivity socially as well, and culturally. So I think that's what we can learn from Indigenous communities, very much so.
Great, thank you. I don't know whether, Sarah, there's any link here in terms of you having seen the way that people begin to understand the land again. Has there been anything in the work you've done at Wicken Fen which speaks to any of the points that Rebecca's just made?
I think so, particularly the nature connection point, and there's been a few comments I've spotted in the chats sparked off the back of nature connection that I mentioned in my presentation, and I think that's a really, as I said, it's a really important part of developing people's attitudes and behaviours towards the nature, the natural environment, and the rewilding approaches that we want to pursue, and that we are looking after. And it's the more we work on that nature connection, and I mentioned, noticing, not knowledge, and whilst that knowledge is wonderful, with a lot of people who have lost or not had that opportunity for nature connection, it's really important to recognise that noticing is that first level is important. But there has been, say, anywhere where there's any change in land use, it is always really important as an individual, as an organisation, to understand people's connection to landscapes. Because whilst the Cambridgeshire Fens, for example, it's broadly an intensive arable landscape across much of it, but for many people, even though that's only been the situation for the last couple of 100 years, or even less in many cases, that's what many people remember. It's what their parents and their grandparents remember, and they talk about. So even the changes that we're introducing and that we see as positive can be seen as damaging to people's cultural heritage and land that are there with the existing landscapes before you introduce changes and move that forward.
Yes, thank you. That really rounds off that point beautifully. So the next most upvoted questions when Hannah prepared these was, how can the rewilding movement be extended for everyone? Much of the countryside is not accessible to the public. How do we make sure that decisions about land are not made entirely by landowners? And I my answer from Heal's point of view is that Heal is a way for people to join, and there are other things happening locally where there are people raising money. We get questions about that all the time. Countryside accessibility is a bigger question than probably any of us can answer, though I might come to you briefly, Rebecca, on that. And decisions about land. If you own the land, you control what happens on it. I think that's the thing that we at Heal have realised. But Rebecca, do you, and I'll come on to you, Sarah, for the next question, but Rebecca, do you want to talk about that idea of rewilding for all and the countryside accessibility?
Well, I mean, I'm really glad it's one of the questions that was, what's the word, upticked, or anyway, that was most supported, because it's one that's really important to us, because while we are working with a lot of people that own land, we're also working, those that own land, we're working across a spectrum, as a kaleidoscope, as Sarah said, of smaller landowners right up to large estate owners and public landowners like the Ministry of Defence, for instance, and conservation owned land. But it's also really important to us that people who don't own land or have access to land can play their part. And that, I think, well, I mean, we probably all own a tiny bit of land, those of us who are lucky enough to have gardens, so that can happen. I'd love to see neighbourhood rewilding groups forming that then start to influence their parks, and as I said in my talk, that can sort of build that connectivity and provide that almost, I'd love to see those linkages so that people could almost physically follow this connection right from the centre of cities, right from their doorstep into the countryside and to the more remote places that many of us might not have the ability to access. But I'd also like to see more community-led approaches where you bring maybe multiple, like that was used with Coast, where communities come together. I mean, in Scotland, communities have the right to buy, for instance, and the Langham community buyout was a really great example of that, of a community coming together and saying, look, what are we asking of the land? We want to have more of a say and more of involvement, and we want to do so in a way that involves community regeneration, but also nature's restoration. So I think there's lots of really interesting examples. There's farmer clusters, for instance, where multiple farmers come together and maybe producing food, but can create an amazing, again, that connectivity, those corridors through their land and those stepping stones, so that rewilding can sit alongside food production and other forms of land use, as Dom's experience at Wild Ken demonstrates.
And Russ, just to give you a chance to add something into the Q&A, extending the rewilding movement to everyone is essentially what community engagement is about, isn't it? It's about a community level, people feeling that they're having an effect.
Yes, in addition to the work that Coast done on the Isle of Arran, and I suspect in other small communities across Scotland, there are little groups that have got together. We have a small group of people who have taken on various parts of forestry land and are reinstating native trees to that, just in small areas. There are people who are doing small gardening projects, but in such a way that it's not quite like allotments. It's a lot less formal than that, but they are using an area of ground as a community to provide food for themselves, in addition to what else they can buy from the shops. So that there is this motion towards change. People have started doing this, which is brilliant. In Scotland, we benefit from a right to responsible access, which you don't have in England yet. Maybe one day. That allows people more chance to see what actually happens, and I think partly that might be a reason why from the 1st of March this year you cannot now have an unlimited cull of mountain hares in Scotland to protect grouse moors from these ravenous beasts that eat all the heather. The population of wild hares up here is now about 5% of what it was in the 1950s. So it's it's encouraging to see people take on board what's happening and think, I can do something about this.
Definitely.
Sometimes it's just a matter of raising your voice.
Definitely. So we've only got 4 minutes left. So Sarah, this is Sarah King. The next question says, for people who've got money to buy land, what's the advice? How do you choose the right place? How do you know which land parcel to buy? Have you got anything quickly to say on that?
Well, I'd say that we've got a lot of resources on the Rewilding Britain website about approaches to rewilding, how to get started, how to start gathering information about your land. So instead of me going through that now in the short time that we have, there's a great resource on the website, and we're adding to that all the time. In terms of where to buy, I would encourage you to have a look at the local groups that are being set up on the network. They'll be able to help advise on how to connect up with other schemes like nature recovery networks and bug life beelines and where other rewilding projects are. So hopefully that will provide a good starting point for anyone looking to buy land and wanting to join up with other initiatives that are happening.
Great. Well, we are almost out of time, so I'm so sorry there are lots of questions that this group haven't been able to answer, but perhaps one day we should have a rewilding Q&A and simply do questions, because there are lots. So thank you all, and I'm just going to say something quickly about Heal and how you can become involved and have your name on your own patch of land. So we have a scheme called Heal 3x3, which is brought to life in this illustration behind me. And for £20, you can sponsor a patch of land, which Heal will then buy as part of its first site. So on track to buy. So if that's something that you'd like to do, and each site will, each square will have its own unique what 3 words address. Look up what 3 words, are amazing, but you will know exactly where your land is, and our sites will be open to the public and your patch of land will be in an accessible area. So do support us, and it's our first birthday next week, so it's a very exciting time of year for us. So thank you for all your questions. I know I didn't say who I was, but I'm one of the founders of Heal, so better late than never. It's been wonderful to have this event. So I'll hand back to Emma or Rebecca to say farewell.
Emma.
Thanks, Jan. You summarised all those projects really nicely. And yes, we had over 109 questions in total. So thanks for being such an engaged audience. It's been really fascinating just to see you all talking, sharing email addresses for volunteering opportunities, and start. It looks like today has started, you know, something in you all, and I really hope that that has. And I think our 3 speakers today have all just really demonstrated that rewilding does not exempt people. People are part of the rewilding solution, and you know, I'm just looking forward to just seeing how the rewilding just continues to grow across Britain. So I just want to say thank you to everybody that's joined us today. Thank you for our speakers. For anybody that's an individual that would like to kind of know how to rewild their gardens, for example, you know, and actions they can take at home, Rewilding Britain have got lots of resources on their website. And if you sign up to our e-newsletter, we do also set you on your own little rewilding journey, where we give you lots of guides, you know, how to rewild your gardens, how to kind of influence your local councils to say no to the mow and things like that. And Heal Rewilding as well have really beautiful e-newsletters. So signing up to those 2 places is a really good place to start. And for anybody that's donated to the event today, that wasn't mandatory, so thank you so much for all of your donations. That's going to be split 50-50 between Heal and Rewilding Britain. And I know it wasn't on the agenda, but I think I want to finish today just by showcasing that video that we played at the start. Just at the end, I think again it just summarizes everything and really shows everything happening globally. We've spoken about what's happening locally in Britain. So I'm just going to summarize it with that video, and then have a fantastic day. Get outside and enjoy nature. Thank you, everybody.
Are you ready to be part of something wild? Something incredible. It's called Rewilding, and it's already underway. We are millions of people, a turning tide. From doorstep to delta, summit to sea, across every continent. Now is the time to act, to protect, restore, and rewild the living world. All life depends on our actions. Now. We are all part of nature, within its intricate web of life. If it heals, so do we. People and wildlife can thrive together. Let's change our future and leave this earth better and more beautiful than we found it. Are you ready to rewild our world? Come and join us.